Welcome back to another video from Leadership Development That Works, the channel focused on no-nonsense practical advice that's going to help you be a better leader. My name's Kyle Berger, and I'll be your partner in the leadership trenches. I've worked with leaders like you to help you get promoted, to increase top talent retention, and drive better team performance. With my real-world experience, together we'll craft actionable strategies that work. The focus for today's video is defeating dysfunctional team conflict. I'm going to cover mistakes to avoid and strategies that'll help you be more effective in that space. But before we get into the heart of it, I want to encourage you to hit that like button, subscribe so you can get future leadership tips, and I'll be happy to read any comments you put below. So defeating dysfunctional team conflict. Let me start by painting the picture for you. So you're in a leadership position. You're in a one-on-one meeting with one of your team members. Everything's going along just fine. And then all of a sudden they start complaining about issues they're having working with a fellow team member. I've been there. Your heart might sink. You might say to yourself, here we go again, or I don't have time for this. So mistakes to avoid in that situation. A common one leaders make, and they do it with good intention, is they stay with that team member and they say, well, let me gather their side of the story. So they take all their notes and they listen to them complain about all the issues they're having with this other team member. And then when they're done, they go meet one-on-one with the fellow team member they're having the issue with, and they get their version of events. Spoiler alert, their version is always going to be different. So then they have to go back to the original team member that talk about the different versions of events and resolve that. And now you're going back and forth. You're like a ping pong. And really, you are refereeing that situation. Anytime you are dealing with conflict on your team and you feel like a middleman, that should be a red flag to you. You need to think about a different approach. So what's the problem with playing that middleman? Well, there's two issues with it. First, even if you succeed in tampering down that conflict at that particular moment, what happens the next time these two have an issue? You're going to be right back in there playing middleman again. And let's be honest, you don't have time to do that. Second problem with that approach is inadvertently, as a leader, you are contributing to a dysfunctional communication loop on the team, where when team members have problems with each other, rather than communicating with each other and dealing with it like adults, they talk to everybody else and their mother about the problem. And you are actually inadvertently encouraging that kind of dysfunctional communication loop with that approach. So, strategies to help you better effectively deal with this. So you're in that meeting with that team member and they start complaining about the issues they're having working with a fellow team member. First thing you got to get right is your mindset. Your mindset when that kind of a situation arises needs to be, first and foremost, how do I enable these two to deal with this issue and work through it effectively on their own? That's your starting point. Then you want to start asking questions to get this team member thinking constructively about the issue. Because a lot of times if they've come to the point where they're complaining to you about a fellow team member, they're going to be in their emotions. And when they're in their emotions, they're not going to be in a great place to resolve the issue. So help them get out of their emotions and think more constructively. So start asking them questions about what is it they think they could do differently to help resolve this. How do they want to approach this issue with this fellow employee that will help actually resolve it? Start getting into concrete actions and steps they can take. Once you do that, then you want to start encouraging them to actually have that conversation with the team member on their own. So how do you want to approach this team member in a way that you think will help effectively resolve this conflict? And they share with you the approach. Coach them on it. You know both people involved. So, well, how do you think that team member would respond to your approach there? And make suggestions to them. Give them feedback. Help them. Even role play it with them. Let's you and I go through it. I'll play the team member you're having an issue with. Let's talk through this. And you want to help them feel more confident about having that conversation. At some point in that part of the discussion, you want to share with them your expectation is when members of the team are having an issue that they make a good faith effort to work that out with each other. Then you want to, and this is really critical, you want to get their commitment on when they're going to go have that conversation. And you want to, before you get out of that meeting with them, establish follow-up. So if they say to you, I'm going to have that conversation with them next week, great. When we have our one-on-one in 2 weeks, let's start by reviewing how that conversation went. See, that's where the power of one-on-ones is really important. It allows you to follow up on things like this. And I talk a lot about that in this channel. So you get their commitment to do it, you establish follow-up, and then you make sure you do the follow-up. Why is that so critical? Because if you don't do those last two parts, get their commitment, establish follow-up, chances are they're not going to go have the conversation. How do I know this? Because they haven't already had the conversation. They're coming to you with it. They're hoping you'll have that conversation for them, right? So you've dealt with it effectively. They go and they have the conversation. You follow up in the one-on-one meeting with them. Possible outcomes, right? They don't have the conversation. You want to hold them accountable to that. Why not? When are you going to do it? Coach them up again. Don't give in to taking back control of it right away. See if you can stay the course with them around having that conversation. Another possibility, which is great when it happens, is I had the conversation. I feel like we're in a much better place, and I think we're going to be able to resolve this moving forward. Another possibility is, yeah, I had the conversation and it didn't work. We didn't get anywhere. So at that point, if they've had the conversation, you ask some questions, you ascertain that this person actually made a really good faith effort to, in fact, resolve the issue. Okay, at that point, you may need to get involved. But how you get involved is really critical. You get involved by bringing both of them together. And again, getting them out of their emotions, asking them questions to help them think constructively through this. Asking them, well, what could each of you have done differently to have avoided being in this conflict? Ask them a question like, going forward, what's the commitment both of you are willing to make that will lessen the likelihood of having this kind of misunderstanding or conflict in the future? You may even ask them to put it in writing and sign it. But you bringing the two of them together. You're not running around playing this middleman role with that approach. So let's do a quick recap. You want to avoid being that ping pong, right? So anytime you feel like you're in that middleman position, that's a red flag to you. You need to think about a different approach. The approach needs to be focused on and centered on enabling them to effectively handle this conflict between themselves, right? And you may have to coach that team member that's coming to you and complaining on how to approach it. You know both people involved, so coach them up on that. You can even role play it with them. You get commitment on when they're going to have that conversation, and you definitely need to follow up on that to see how it actually went. Because depending on how it went, at that point you may need to get involved or you may need to provide more coaching. You'll be able to better judge the situation. It may take more effort and energy up front, but if you stick with it and you are consistent with it, in the long run, you're going to be a lot better off. And you're going to have a team that has a very constructive communication dynamic where they deal with each other when they have problems and they understand that that's your expectation for them. And you're there to help and coach and bring a resolution to it, but they have to have some ownership on this, and they have to be taking responsibility when they have issues and acting like adults and working through them. Any comments you have on this? What's worked for you? Have you tried some of these strategies I've talked about? And how have they gone for you? And what are some different things that you would like to share that you think would be good for people to know? Thank you for your time and attention.